this card, they come to their own consensus.
Yes, definitely. Ladies and gentlemen, we're also now joined over the phone by Dr. Sharif Amir, the Professor of Geopolitical Affairs at the University of Paris. Dr. Amir, can you hear us, sir?
Yeah, I hear very well. Hello.
Dr. Amir, we're talking about the 151st meeting of the Arab foreign ministers that took place last week in the headquarters of the Arab League here in Cairo. And now we're discussing with Mr. Sabrin actually what can be done towards the Turkish involvement and the Turkish influence in the region, mainly in the crises, the Syrian crisis, as well as the Iraqi one. Do you feel that the European Union might be willing this time around to actually take a much proactive step in trying to influence Turkey into taking a step back and withdrawing their influence within these crises, maybe using, as Mr. Sabrin mentioned, economic sanctions, limiting trade? They already didn't approve of Turkey joining the European Union. Do you feel that maybe the European Union, along with the Arab states, can enforce a lot of measures that would pressure Turkey?
Let's examine what's taking place in the foreign policy of Turkey now. It's about blackmail. The Turkish President Erdogan has decided for a long time ago that blackmailing the EU is the only way to gain anything, money or even a seat in the EU. He knows very well that he has many problems along his history as president there. So the problems are interior and exterior. And he knows also that the EU is becoming more and more not welcoming him as a democratic president. So I think that the fact that he has shifted all his alliances from the West towards Turkey, towards Iran and Russia, has put the EU in a very difficult position, because Turkey is a member of NATO. And let's not forget that. So the fact that Turkey is a member of NATO and an ally of Russia in geopolitics in the Middle East, this is a severe crisis, because we all know that the money comes to NATO through the United States, and the manpower is from Turkey. They have the largest army on ground troops in NATO. So I don't think that the Europeans now are able to make any pressure on him. They know that he is blackmailing them economically. They are in very difficult situation economically also. They know he's blackmailing them socially. He's doing that with the refugees card also. And he's blackmailing them also with the relations with Russia. Remember when the fake coup d'etat happened in July 2016 against Erdogan? He threatened the Americans to quit and leave the Angerlik air base, which is one of the head spears of the American foreign policy in the Middle East. So he's just working with a blackmail card. And that's what I said many times. This is the difference between Egypt's foreign policy and Turkey's foreign policy, that we are not about blackmailing, we're about mutual interest with everyone. And he's not working on that side. So I think that the Europeans, who are already divided within themselves, Italy against France, and then you have the Visegrad countries, which is Poland, Hungary, and the Czech Republic, and Slovenia. They are all against the refugees. So I think that there's a deep crisis. The only thing is that the EU has to work with alternative allies in this region, and it's Egypt now's role to take this task.
So, Dr. Amir, do you think that maybe it would be up to the US to use its influence on Turkey, and maybe while we're at it, maybe use its influence on Iran as well, since it has its own issues with Iran, talking about influencing their influence within the region?
Well, let's see that the U.S. foreign policy is also more complicated than the EU and Turkey, because under President Trump's administration, things are very different. The previous administrations in Washington were pro-EU, where President Trump is very clear, make America great again. That means that he said you have to pay the money as members of NATO first, then I will see if I can make any pressure on the Turks. He had made crucial economic pressure on Erdogan when the U.S. pastor was imprisoned. Once he was released, everything got back again to normal. So that means he's working only for the U.S. interest.
Yes.
For Russia, he knows very well that he shouldn't be the head spear of the conflict between the EU and Russia. So
yes.
he knows very well that he has to work with everyone, and when the time comes that he has to pressure Turkey for America's interest, I repeat, for only America's interest, he will do it.
Yes, definitely. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Sharif Amir, the Professor of Geopolitical Affairs at the University of Paris, thank you very much for joining us. Definitely there's a lot of work to do. There's definitely a lot of issues to be dealt with, hopefully in a political, peaceful and diplomatic way. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have for this edition of the Daily Debate. But before we go, I'd like to thank our very distinguished guest, Mr. Mohammed Sabreen, the Deputy Editor